Stay right there. You haven't finished learning respect yet.
Grandma, it's cold.
Amara, don't do this. She's just a child. Child, in this house, only those who OBE matter.
No way! He's not supposed to be home at this hour!
Amara! Wara! What the hell are you doing?
Daddy, help us.
Why? Why? Why would you do this to my mother and my child?
This life, no treasure is more precious than compassion. Love the elderly, protect the little ones, for they are the most fragile hearts among us. One act of cruelty can shatter an entire family, but a single moment of kindness can save a life. If this story touched you, please like, share, subscribe to Afra Tales by T, so we can continue spreading these human lessons. Listen until the end, because the truth that's about to unfold will take your breath away. A single moment is about to change the fate of this entire family. There are memories Zara wishes she could touch just one more time. When she was 4, her mother spun her around the courtyard of their old home, her tiny feet bouncing with each step, her dress twirling into a circle of happiness. The afternoon sun painted both their faces gold, and Mama Bisi sat by the doorway, smiling with her whole heart every time Zara burst out laughing. On summer afternoons, the gentle spice of jollof drifted from the kitchen. In the evenings, her mother held her close, singing old Yoruba lullabies, songs about mothers, about peace, about a home that would never close its doors to a growing child. Back then, Zara believed the world was a kind place. She believed that if she fell, 2 arms would always lift her up. She believed that nighttime always smelled like her mother's hair. But everything stopped when she turned 7. On a heavy rainy evening, Zara stood under a black umbrella, clutching tightly onto Mama Bisi's skirt as her mother's small coffin was lowered into the ground. She didn't fully understand death. She only knew that from that day on her mother would no longer sing, no longer cook jollof, no longer laugh when she danced. Her mother took half of Zara's heart with her into the earth. A year later, her father remarried. And from the moment Amara walked through the mansion door, with a smile sharp as a blade, Zara felt something colder than that rainy day. A chill that seeped into every room, every meal, every quiet sentence. At first, it was just a feeling like a long shadow behind her. But it grew. Amara wasn't like her mother. She wasn't like any woman Zara had ever known. She was beautiful, glamorous, impeccably dressed, walking like a Lagos queen. But beneath the polished exterior, she looked at Zara the way someone looks at an old, useless object. And Mama Bisi, gentle, patient, the keeper of the home, only needed to drop a cup for Amara to glare at her, as if she'd committed a crime. Amara didn't need to say a word. Her eyes said enough. This house doesn't want you. It started with subtle comments. Children shouldn't sit on white sofas. Don't bring cooking smells into the living room. Don't turn on the TV when I'm resting. Then came the invisible walls closing in around Zara. She couldn't call her father when he traveled. She couldn't sit at the table if Amara had guests. She wasn't allowed to mention her real mother. The more she missed her mother, the smaller the space between safety and fear became. Mama Bisi saw everything with old eyes that still saw more clearly than anyone. She saw Zara smile less, saw her quietly wipe tears in the corner of the kitchen, saw the wounds that left no bruises, but cut deeper than any bruise ever could. She tried to protect Zara with everything she had left, with meals, with lullabies, with warm arms that tried to fill a mother's absence. But some days she would look at Amara and know a storm was coming. Amara carried the traits of someone who had known hunger, humiliation, and deep insecurity, a fierce ambition, a need to control, and a terror of being replaced. And in her eyes, Zara and Mama Bisi, the two weakest souls in the mansion, were the thorns she wanted to tear out the most. Amara never said it out loud, but the truth was, those two, the old woman and the child, made her feel smaller than anyone who had ever hurt her. Mama Bisi, full of wrinkles, full of the scars of time, smelling faintly of cheap soap, was like a mirror reflecting the childhood Amara had tried to bury, lock away, and throw the key into the ocean. She had grown up in the alleys of Ajagunle, where drainage water mixed with rain, where people fought over a small bag of rice, where her mother washed clothes for strangers until her fingernails peeled off. Amara hated poverty, hated the way people looked at her and decided her worth in a single second. And now, in this wide white mansion, with tall glass doors and a gate that opened as softly as a breath, the presence of Mama Bisi made her feel like she had never truly escaped where she came from. And Zara, that child, carried a face that was half familiar, half foreign. Those deep Lagos night eyes, but they weren't hers. They belonged to the woman who came before her. The first wife Chijioke had loved with his whole heart, the woman who, even buried deep in the earth, still lived in every corner of this home. All Zara had to do was sit quietly in a corner, hugging her little pillow, whispering memories about her mother, and Amara's heart tightened, pulled apart by an invisible wire. Not because she hated children, but because Zara reminded her painfully she was not the child's mother. She was not the first love. She was not the woman Chijioke chose freely. She was the one who came after. The second choice. The replacement for a void she could never truly fill. The bitterness started with little things. When Mama Bisi placed a silver spoon in the wrong drawer, Amara scoffed. "Don't touch European things. Your hands are used to plastic." When Zara spilled a glass of water, Amara said coldly, "Poor kids are always clumsy." Each sentence was a needle. Each day another cut. And those cuts slowly made Amara feel stronger, taller, more in control of the house she wanted to claim as completely hers. Whenever Chijioke traveled for work, the shift in the house was unmistakable. Mama Bisi became quieter. Zara became wary. Amara became free. And in those days, the darkness inside her grew not through shouting, but through small rules, whispered controls. "You don't need to keep cash. It's dangerous. I'll manage it." Zara shouldn't go outside. Kids like her need to stay home and learn manners. "Don't call your father. He has real work, he's not your babysitter." Each sentence was a hand pushing the grandmother and child into a corner. Each action another loop tightening around them. Amara didn't hit. She didn't slap. She never yelled. She suffocated them with gentle, quiet rules, the most dangerous kind of cruelty. Cruelty born from old wounds. Cruelty born from fear of losing power again. On long nights when the whole house slept, Amara stood in the dark of the master bedroom, staring down at the empty courtyard. Under the warm yellow lights, the old woman and the skinny child rose in her memory, like two shadows refusing to disappear. One shadow reminded her she had once been poor. The other reminded her she was second. And in that silence, Amara made a decision never spoken but deeply rooted. Those two shadows had to leave this house, one way or another. With Mama Bisi, she wanted her sent back to the village. She belongs there. Amara often thought, near the old church, near mud houses, far from me, far from Chijioke. With Zara, she wanted her shipped off to a faraway boarding school. A boarding school child can't hug her father every night, can't sit with her grandmother, can't stand in the way of a marriage. And the mansion, Amara wanted it clean. Truly clean, free of cheap soap, free of old woman prayers, free of small, hurried footsteps, free of every memory of the first wife. She wanted control over the wealth, the lifestyle, the reputation, and the man's heart. She wanted the spotlight to fall only on her, not dimmed by the presence of the other two. That quiet hatred, rooted like a poisonous vine, grew inside her every day. No one saw it. No one heard it. No one knew how strong it had become. Not until the day when the Lagos sun scorched the mansion courtyard, the fateful noon when that hatred finally crawled out into the light. And it did so through an act that day, and for the rest of her life Zara would never forget. That morning began with an unusual silence. Chijioke hurried down the stairs with his suitcase crisp white shirt pressed flat, the faint scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. Zara stood at the bottom step, clutching her worn-out teddy bear, watching every move her father made. Mama Bisi, slightly bent at the waist, rested her hand on the wooden railing, giving advice while hiding worry deep in her eyes. "I'll only be gone for 2 days," Chijioke said. He leaned down, kissed his mother's forehead, then bent again to kiss Zara's hair. "Be good. Listen to Grandma and listen to Amara." He paused a moment at that last name as if he himself could hear the metallic edge in it, but he didn't allow the thought to linger. Work awaited. His phone buzzed. The driver was already outside. The front doors closed behind him. The sound of the SUV engine faded. For a few seconds, the entire house felt like it had fallen into a vacuum. Then Amara's heels clicked across the marble floor, slicing through the quiet. She stood in the center of the foyer, still wearing the same body-hugging dress she had worn to see her husband off, but the expression on her face was no longer the one from a few minutes earlier. The gentle smile was gone, replaced by cold sharpness. "Zara," she said softly, the edge in her voice barely hidden. "Come here." Zara walked slowly, eyes lowered. "Yes. You used your father's card to buy books online last week, didn't you?" Amara twirled the secondary card between her fingers, the metallic edge catching sunlight from the window. Zara stiffened. I only bought school books." "No one asked whether you were studying?" Amara cut in. "From now on, I'll keep this card. If Mama Bisi wants to buy anything, she'll also come to me." "Understood." Zara pressed her lips together. From the kitchen doorway, Mama Bisi watched with tired eyes that seemed to gather one more wrinkle. "There's no need for Mama to hold cash." Amara continued, her tone as casual as if she were commenting on the weather. "She's old, what if she drops it? And these days, people like her get taken advantage of." Each word fell like a pebble into Mama Bisi's heart. But she stayed silent. She was used to swallowing the words she wanted to say. By noon, the Lagos sun hammered down on the roof like a blacksmith's tool. The air outside shimmered. The sky was blindingly white. Zara usually stayed inside the cool rooms at this hour, but today Amara called her downstairs. "You're going to help clean the courtyard," Amara said, pulling on yellow rubber gloves, the harsh smell of cleaning agents filling the air. But Grandma said, "The sun is too hot," Zara whispered. "In this house I make the decisions," Amara replied, eyes hard. "Not her. Bring the bucket and the mop outside." Zara bit her lip, but obeyed. In the kitchen, Amara gestured to the maid. "Pour the floor cleaner dish soap and leftover oily water into this bucket. Don't change it." The maid hesitated for a second, but reassured herself Madame probably needed it for the drains, then did as told. The mixture released a thick, harsh smell, swallowing the air around it. Amara looked at the bucket for a moment, the corner of her mouth lifting. Fitting, she thought. Zara knelt beside the flower bed, wiping stains on the tiles. Sweat streamed down her back, her shirt clinging to her skin. Every time her small hand touched the burning ground, she flinched. From the doorway, Mama Bisi could handle no more. "Amara," she said softly, trying to keep her voice gentle, "let the child rest. This heat, don't interfere," Amara replied without turning. "You worked in the sun back then, didn't you? Why should she be any different? But she's weaker. She's not used to. Because you baby her." Amara snapped, spinning around. "You and your constant grandma this, grandma that. She never sees me as someone in this house." Mama Bisi fell silent. It was one of the rare times Amara came close to speaking her real feelings. She felt like an outsider. But instead of healing that wound, she used it as a reason to inflict more wounds. Zara looked up, her face flushed, hair soaked with sweat. "Can I rest for a moment, Ma?" she asked, using the title Amara forced her to say, a title that fit her like a shoe, 2 sizes too tight. "My feet hurt. They're burning." "Get up straight," Amara ordered without a second of hesitation. "If you don't respect me, you'll learn under the sun." I didn't disrespect." Zara tried to explain, tears glimmering. "I only—" Talking back. Amara stepped forward, her shadow falling over the child. "Stand still. Kneel under the sun and learn how to behave." Mama Bisi moved closer, gripping a wooden chair for support. "Amara, you're going too far." "Too far," Amara laughed under her breath. "Too far is when you two think you can act like you own this house, talking to the driver, calling him behind my back, complaining about me, without asking my permission. Today I'm only reminding everyone of their place." For a moment the two women's eyes met. One carried deep, festering anger. The other carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived long enough to see how these battles end. "He wouldn't agree to this," Mama Bisi whispered. "If he knew, my son would be heartbroken." Amara heard the words, "my son," like someone pressing on an old bruise. "He isn't only your son," Amara hissed. "He's my husband." The statement wasn't just ownership, it was a fortress she desperately clung to. She turned sharply and walked toward the bucket. Zara watched each of her steps, a familiar feeling rising in her chest, the same feeling she felt the day her mother's coffin was lowered. Helplessness pulling her downward, the ground losing its solidity. She remembered her mother's words, "If one day you're scared, stand behind Grandma. She'll protect you." Now she was standing behind Grandma indeed. But the sun still burned, the tiles still scorched, and in front of them, the woman named Amara was lifting a bucket of dirty water. As Amara's hand closed around the handle, a hot gust swept across the courtyard, carrying the smell of grease and chemicals. That afternoon, the Lagos sky was perfectly clear. No one knew that in the heart of a white mansion, an ordinary day for a wealthy family was quietly turning into the day darkness took the throne. And Amara's resentment, fed by poverty, by shame, by the hunger to feel above others, was finally spilling over, dragging an old woman and a young girl into its path. The hot air rising from the courtyard curled upward like the breath of a wild beast. Zara knelt in the middle of the yard, her tiny shoulders trembling, her breathing sharp and choked. The Lagos sun felt as if it were hanging directly above her, making every vein beneath her skin feel ready to burst. Amara stood a few steps away, holding the heavy bucket filled with murky liquid. She tilted her head slightly, observing the grandmother and child, the same way someone might study 2 small animals that had misbehaved. There was no explosive anger in her eyes, only a deliberate coldness, as if she had imagined this moment for a very long time. Despite the blood trickling from her knees, Mama Bisi struggled to stand and shield her granddaughter. "Zara, come here," she whispered. her voice shaking but still steady. Zara scrambled to her grandmother's side, wrapping her tiny arms around the woman's leg as if clinging to the last thread of safety she had left. Amara scoffed softly, as if the sight only irritated her further. "Of course," she said with a sneer. "Hide behind the old woman, just like always." Mama Bisi lifted her head, her tired eyes still bright. "Amara, you don't have to do this. We've never harmed you." Harm? Amara laughed hollowly. "Every time I look at the two of you, I'm reminded of exactly where I stand in this house. And I'm tired of it." Tired, the old woman's voice was small but firm. "You don't need to dump that bucket to feel like you matter." For a brief second, something flickered in Amara's eyes. A flash of emotion, maybe hurt, maybe rage, maybe an old memory someone had accidentally brushed against. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She lifted the bucket. "Just a little lesson," Amara said slowly, "to remind you both where you belong." Mama Bisi spread her arms wide, shielding Zara like she was shielding the last piece of her own soul. "Amara, stop!" she cried, but her breath was weaker than the sun pounding down on the courtyard. Without the slightest hesitation, Amara tipped the bucket. Splash! The sound crashed down like a breaking wave, sharp, heavy, merciless. The filthy water slammed into the grandmother and child like a shower of humiliation. The cold, grimy mixture, left sitting in the shade for hours, poured over their heads, shoulders, backs, then splashed onto the tiles, forming dark stains that soaked deep into the ground. The stench hit instantly: old grease detergent, spoiled kitchen water, all of it mixing into a choking cloud that made Zara cough violently, her eyes burning. "Grandma, I can't breathe." Zara sobbed, trying to wipe her face with hands already coated in suds and grease. Mama Bisi squeezed her eyes shut, her shoulders trembling. The dirty water seeped into her clothes, into the creases of her aging skin. There was something in her expression, a pain not caused by the cold or the smell, but by a humiliation so deep it cut straight to the heart. She bowed her head, as if trying to take the shame onto herself so her granddaughter wouldn't have to. Zara clung tighter to her tiny wet hands, gripping her soaked clothes like they were her lifeline. The world around them shrank to the sound of their ragged breathing, soft sobs, and the steady drip of filthy water hitting the tiles. Amara watched them for a moment. No regret, no hesitation, no flicker of empathy. Only a chilling satisfaction. She dropped the bucket. The hollow thud echoed across the courtyard. She smoothed a strand of hair behind her ear and turned away, as if she had just completed a routine household chore, not degraded two human beings. Next time, Amara said, not even bothering to look back, "Remember who has the power in this house." Zara collapsed onto the tiles, her tears mixing with the dirty water, making her cheeks sting from the harsh cleaning chemicals. She tried to inhale, but the smell made her cough harder. Mama Bisi pulled her close, stroking her hair, her hands trembling, but full of a love that refused to break. "Zara, breathe. Breathe, my child. It's okay. It's okay." Her voice was hoarse, cracked, like her heart was breaking with every word. In that moment, Zara whispered almost too softly to hear Grandma. "Why does she hate us so much?" Mama Bisi didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because how could she explain to a child that some people carry a darkness so deep? They hurt others just to feel like they exist. She simply held her tighter, as if letting go would allow the world to swallow them whole. The sun kept burning, the dirty water kept dripping, and Amara walked back into the mansion calm, composed, as if she had just restored order to a kingdom where she believed herself to be queen. Zara leaned against her grandmother's chest, her whole body cold despite the heat. There was no panic left in her eyes now. Only a different kind of fear, slower, deeper one that seeped into her bones. The fear that from this day on, every moment in this house would never be the same again. The drive from the airport to the mansion felt shorter than usual that day. Chijioke sat in the back seat of the black SUV, eyes drifting toward the window, where the Lagos midday heat shimmered in waves. His 2-day business trip had just been cut short, a meeting canceled unexpectedly, a partner's emergency, and suddenly a 2-day trip became half a day. Maybe I should just go home and rest, he thought. Have lunch with Mom. Ask Zara about her test from last week. The idea softened the edge of his expression. He could almost see Zara running after him with her workbook eyes sparkling, "Daddy, I got an A." And he could see his mother. Mama Bisi resting her hand on his shoulder, not saying much, but her eyes always full of pride. "They'll be happy you came back early," the driver said, as if reading his thoughts. "Madame Amara will probably be surprised too." "Yeah," Chijioke replied, tired but gentle. "Don't call ahead. Just drive straight home." He wanted to see his house as it truly was, unprepared, unpolished, unmasked. The SUV turned onto the road leading to the estate. The trees on both sides rustled under the hot wind. The security gate scanned the license plate, gave its familiar beep, and slowly slid open. Chijioke slipped his phone into his pocket. He had no idea that in just a few more steps, everything he believed about the home he built was about to be torn apart. Outside, Zara was still trembling violently in her grandmother's arms. Dirty water streamed down her hair, her clothes, and onto the tiled ground. The smell clung to their skin, to every breath they took. Mama Bisi tried wiping her granddaughter's face with her sleeve, but the moment her fingers touched Zara's cheek, the girl cried out in pain. "Just bear with it a little," the old woman whispered. "Let me wipe your eyes, so it won't burn." Zara nodded faintly, but the innocence in her eyes was gone. In its place lingered fear and something dangerously close to losing trust. Amara stood beneath the awning, arms crossed over her chest, leaning against the glass door. She looked at the two of them the way one looks at a stain on the floor, slightly annoyed, but not enough to bother touching it again. She was already planning. Later she'd make the maid clean the courtyard. She'd force Zara to scrub it again. And tonight, if Chijioke video called, she'd make Zara sit far from the camera with the excuse that the girl was tired. Everything in her mind was neatly arranged. Everything except one thing. The black SUV was rolling into the courtyard. Earlier than expected. From inside the car, Chijioke glanced through the window, planning to text the kitchen to reheat lunch. Then his eyes froze. In the middle of the courtyard were two collapsed figures, one old, one small, their clothes drenched, stained black, hair matted to their skin, clinging to each other like people who had just been swept ashore after a flood. His chest tightened before he could fully understand. "Stop the car," he said, his voice dropping low. The driver braked hard. The SUV came to a halt in the center of the courtyard. Chijioke opened the door, and the burning heat of the tiles rushed up at him the moment his foot touched the ground. In that moment, time stretched out into slow, trembling strands. Chijioke looked at his mother first. She was soaked, her hair plastered against her forehead, dirty water running down the wrinkles on her face as if trying to wash away the dignity she had guarded her entire life. Her frail arms were still shielding Zara, as if lowering them even for a second would cause the whole world to collapse onto her granddaughter. Then he turned to his child. Zara sat pressed against her grandmother's leg, her tiny hands gripping the soaked fabric. Her tears mixed with the filthy water streaking down her cheeks, leaving pale trails amid the dark stains. Her shirt clung to her skin, her lips trembling. Her eyes, both relieved and terrified, looked at her father as if he were the only lifeline in a violent tide. Then he looked at Amara. She stood stiffly under the veranda, the sunlight reflecting off the glass behind her, stretching her shadow long across the tiles. Her face had paled at the shock, but her chin remained lifted habit from a lifetime of refusing to appear weak. Chijioke inhaled his chest, tightening painfully. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He didn't lash out. His anger was never the kind that burst and vanished. It was the kind that burned low and steady hotter with every second. He stepped forward. Each step struck the tiles like a hammer. Each step tightened an invisible rope around Amara's chest. Amara, he said, his voice dropping into something cold and honed like steel. What did you do? Amara felt her throat dry instantly. The explanations she had rehearsed from the moment she heard the car enter the gate, every word she had prepared, suddenly vanished. I just, she swallowed, just taught them some respect. Taught one word sharp enough to crack the air. Chijioke's eyes were like blades. Not the eyes of a husband arguing with his wife. The eyes of a man who just found an intruder inside his home harming the people he loves. With this, he asked, voice low but unmistakably clear, by dumping filthy water on my mother and my daughter beside him. Zara whimpered softly. Mama Bisi placed a shaking hand on her shoulder. She forced herself to stay silent. She knew this was the moment the two of them needed to face each other directly without her interference. Amara dug her nails into her palms until crescents of pain formed in her skin. You don't understand. She tried to steady her voice. Since the day I came into this house, they've never treated me like family. It's always them, mother and granddaughter together, always looking at me like I don't belong. I just wanted to prove you're stronger. He cut in by humiliating them in the middle of the courtyard. That's not fair. Amara's voice rose, cracking. You only see today. Were you home when they talked about me, when they acted behind my back? Do you know how much I've tolerated? I'm human too. I hurt. This time the word hit harder, a vein pulsing at his temple. He turned toward his mother and daughter. This is the hurt you're talking about. A 70-year-old woman kneeling under the sun, drenched in dirty water. A child crying and apologizing because she's terrified of you. That's your pain. His words slammed into Amara like a hammer. For a split second, she wanted to scream. Have you ever cared about my pain, living with 3 people who talk in stories I'm not part of? Watching you hold your daughter, but never once turning to ask if I'm okay. But pride crushed the confession in her throat. All she managed was, you always defend them, so what did you marry me for? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Silence fell over the courtyard. The birds stopped. The distant street noise vanished behind the high walls. All that remained was the soft drip of dirty water falling from Zara's shirt onto the tiles. Chijioke stared at Amara for a long moment. I married you, he said slowly, because I believed you would stand beside me, that you'd be a second mother to Zara, that you'd respect my mother, that you'd be a partner in this family. He paused. The words I believed dropped like stones. But what I saw today, he exhaled, pain flashing through his eyes, is a woman standing under the veranda, watching her mother-in-law and stepdaughter being humiliated as if it was her victory. Amara opened her mouth, but no sound came. It felt as if someone were pressing a hand against her throat. You don't understand, she forced out, her voice no longer sharp. You don't see how they treat me. You don't know how much I've had to swallow. I just wanted, just once, for them to know I have power too. Power, he repeated, bitter, almost laughing, but not really. Power in this house doesn't come from stepping on others, Amara. It doesn't come from a bucket of dirty water. He pointed toward the grandmother and child. That is my mother. That is my daughter. And you are the woman I gave a chance to, after losing my wife. His voice tightened, and this is how you chose to answer that chance. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, lifting the hem of Amara's dress, carrying the acrid smell of dirty water back toward her, making even her stomach twist. She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Inside her mind, a faint voice whispered, "Cry. Apologize. Show remorse." But pride-old wounds, childhood humiliations, and all the lonely nights in this mansion mixed together, pulling her mouth into the wrong shape. "If you really loved me," Amara whispered hoarsely, "you wouldn't have left me alone with them all this time." The sentence struck deep into a place inside Chijioke he rarely looked at. He knew he wasn't a perfect husband. He knew he hid behind work to avoid the tension at home. He knew he had let his mother-daughter and new wife navigate each other without him. But did any of that justify the scene before him? He turned to Zara again. The child was still trembling. "Zara," he said gently. "Yes." Her voice barely a breeze. "Tell Daddy. How many times has this happened?" Zara froze. Her eyes flicked toward her grandmother. Mama Bisi placed her hand on the girl's back and nodded. "It's okay," she murmured. "Tell the truth." Zara bit her lip. Fresh tears spilled. "Not the first time," she whispered. "But today was the worst." A heavy silence settled. Chijioke's anger transformed into something deeper, the sickening weight of failing as a father, a son, and a husband. He looked back at Amara. This time his eyes held more than anger. They held regret, exhaustion, and the unmistakable beginnings of letting go. "I understand now," he said quietly. "Too well." There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to justify. The air in the courtyard grew so thick it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Everyone could feel it. Something in this family had just broken. Not with a loud crack, but with a soft, devastating fracture that would change everything that came next. The silence after Zara's confession wasn't like any silence that had ever existed in that mansion. It wasn't the silence of exhaustion. It wasn't a temporary stillness. It was the kind of silence that felt like ash, heavy, suffocating, right before it erupts into flames. Chijioke slowly rose to his feet. Dirty water still clung to his hands from when he lifted Zara. He looked down at his palm, the same hand that once held his daughter when she was learning to walk. Now stained, soaked in grime and old grease. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, his gaze had changed. No pain, no shock, no more searching for explanations. Only the bare, sharp truth like a newly forged blade. He turned toward Amara. She stood there still in her red dress, hugging every curve, still holding her posture high. But her shoulders had drawn in slightly, as if a cold wind had swept through her. She watched him with a mix of fear and defiance, trying to predict what decision he was about to make. "Chijioke," she called softly. "You have to listen to me. I have reasons. You're leaving this house." His voice did not rise. It did not shake. It did not waver. It was calm, terrifyingly calm. The calm of a man who has finally reached the edge. Amara froze. What? What did you say? You're leaving this house, he repeated. Today. It hit her like a punch to the chest. You can't do that, she cried, the sound cracking. I'm your wife. I'm the woman you chose. You can't just throw me out because of them. No. Just one word, but sharp enough to slice the air in half. The moment you laid a hand on my mother and my child, he stepped forward, his eyes sharper than any wound on Mama Bisi's body. You stopped being anything at all. Amara stumbled back. She searched his face for something, anything. Regret. Softness. A trace of the man who once held her. But all she found was a door closing forever. You forget everything, she choked out. You forget the night you begged me not to leave. You forget when you said you needed me when you held me, Chijioke. You forgot all that. No, he replied. I remember everything, and somehow that hurt her more. But I'll never forget seeing my mother kneeling in filthy water, or my daughter crying and apologizing because she was scared of you. His words struck harder than any blow. Amara rushed toward him, gripping his arm desperately. I've had enough. You don't know how lonely I've been in this house. You don't know. He pulled his arm away, gentle but final. You chose to handle your loneliness by hurting others. No one in this home is responsible for the pain you brought from your past. A moment later, he turned his head. Emeka. A guard ran in from the gate. Sir, take Madame back to her old apartment. Collect the keys. Cancel her secondary credit card. Bring her luggage to the front. Amara went still. You're insane. My mother and my daughter nearly lost their breath under your hands, Chijioke said quietly. Each word tightened like wire. If I'm insane, I've been insane since the moment I saw that. The guard stepped toward her. Madame, please. She yanked her arm away. I'm not done, she screamed, her voice shattering across the courtyard. This house will never be at peace without me. Zara trembled in Mama Bisi's arms. The old woman pulled her closer, as if shielding her from one last poisoned arrow. Amara looked around at Chijioke, at his mother, at the child she never accepted. Then she laughed, a broken sound mixed with pain and hatred. You think they'll love you forever? You think their love is real? One day, you'll learn you're only wanted when people need you. But Chijioke didn't respond. He simply turned away, lifted Zara into his arms. The girl buried her face into his shoulder, sobbing. Mama Bisi stood beside them, exhausted, but still holding her head high, a mother who had never bowed to cruelty. The guard approached Amara again. Madam, please. This time Amara didn't resist. She stepped back, then another step, her eyes never leaving the back of the man she once called her husband. You'll regret this, she whispered. I swear, you'll regret it. But no one heard clearly. No one answered. No one turned to look at her one last time. The mansion doors opened. She was led out carrying the stench of dirty water, the weight of her cruelty, and all the words no one wanted to hear anymore. When the door slammed shut behind her, the sound was final. Not just the end of a marriage, but the end of everything Amara had tried to build with her ambitious, grasping hands. And in the courtyard, where the sun still burned, where the grandmother and child still trembled, a family that seemed broken beyond repair, finally had the chance to breathe again. The house was so quiet, you could hear the second hand ticking on the wall clock. The living room, wide white, cooled by air conditioning, felt like the opposite world from the scorching courtyard outside. But on the sofa, Zara was still curled up, as if the sun were still burning her small shoulders, trembling every few breaths, each sob stifled but impossible to contain. Mama Bisi sat close beside her, pulling the girl into her embrace. She was still shaking, not from the cold, but from the shock and humiliation that hadn't yet faded. The stench of the dirty water had been wiped away, but traces lingered in the air, like a ghost refusing to leave their skin. Chijioke stood by the doorway for a long time, one hand pressed against his forehead. He needed a few minutes to breathe, to gather everything that had just happened and place it into a corner of his heart he could bear to look at. Then he walked toward them. He didn't sit down. He knelt. Kneeling in front of his mother, the aging woman he had always assumed would be fine, would be strong, would weather anything, while he unintentionally left her to face the storm alone. "Mom," his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I left you for too long." Mama Bisi looked at her son. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep sadness and a kind of quiet relief, as if a burden she had carried for years had finally been lifted. "Chijioke," she said softly, calling him the way she did when he was a barefoot boy running around the yard. She lifted her wrinkled hand and placed it against his cheek. Her palm was old, but her touch was still warm. "You didn't leave me. You just didn't see everything. Today, you've seen it." Her gentle hand was enough to break down the walls he had built to look strong. He closed his eyes and something hot fell onto the back of his hand resting on his knee. A man's tears, the ones he never allowed to fall in meetings in the street in front of employees, fell now in front of his mother and his child. "I should have protected you. Protected Zara." He said, each word scraped raw from his throat. "Instead, I let them live in my house with someone I didn't truly understand. I let it get to this." Mama Bisi shook her head gently, interrupting. "Don't let should have destroy the things you still have. God gives us eyes to see, but not everyone chooses to open them. Today you opened yours. For me, that's enough." Zara listened in silence. She twisted her fingers nervously, then suddenly leaned forward and wrapped her arms around her father's neck. "Daddy." He turned and pulled her close, holding her tightly. "Daddy, please don't leave me again." The words were soft, but inside Chijioke's mind they echoed like a bell. Not because he had ever abandoned her, he sent money, he brought gifts after every trip. But he understood for a child who lost her mother and lived with a cruel stepmother, every time he left felt like being left behind all over again. He tightened his embrace. "Daddy's here," he whispered, voice rough but steadying. "Daddy's home. And from now on, I won't let anyone hurt you again. Not even me, not if I ever make you face things alone again." Zara broke into tears this time, not from fear, but from release. Mama Bisi watched father and daughter holding each other, her own eyes shimmering. She leaned back into the sofa, feeling exhaustion wash over her. Yet it was the kind of tiredness that comes after surviving a storm, knowing you still have a home to return to. "Chijioke," she said, voice quiet but firm. "If you truly want to protect your family, start by staying close. Money can't shield a child from the rain. The ones who shield them are their parents' arms." He nodded, slow, determined, like sealing a vow. "I'll rearrange everything," he said. "I'll cut down my work trips, be home more, hire a helper who answers only to you, and give Zara a room she feels is really hers, not a place where she fears being dragged out to learn respect again." Zara lifted her head, eyes still red, but now carrying a faint glimmer of hope. "Daddy, can I put Mommy's picture in my room?" she asked shyly. "Before, she wouldn't let me." Even unfinished, the sentence made the air heavier. Chijioke met his daughter's eyes. "You never need anyone's permission to remember your mother," he said. This house has room for everyone. For Grandma, for you, for your mother, and for every beautiful memory you want to keep. This is our home, not someone else's stage. Mama Bisi smiled, a small smile warm and deep like a hearth rekindled after a long, violent storm. Outside, the sun was lowering. The dark streaks of dirty water on the tiles had dried, fading slowly, swallowed by the last amber light of the day. A housemaid stepped outside and began splashing buckets of clean water onto the courtyard. No one told her to, but everyone understood the courtyard needed washing. Not just the tiles, but the memory of a horrific day the family would never want to relive, yet should never forget. So it would never happen again. Inside the living room, against the white walls, 3 generations sat close together. An old mother, a grown man, and a child who had just lost one kind of mother, but found her father again. They didn't speak much. Each carried their own wounds. But at least from today onward, they knew they would heal them together. Outside, Lagos was still loud, still hot, still dusty. But inside the mansion, for the first time in a long time, peace had begun to find its way home. True family isn't defined by wealth or a mansion. It's defined by love, protection, and respect. The way you treat the weak, the old, and the innocent reveals who you truly are. Never let pride turn you into the monster you once feared. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Afritales by Titil for more powerful family stories every day. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you so much for watching.